6 months after 24 people were killed in Minneapolis, federal agents didn't just arrest shooters. They arrested the mayor of Crystal, Minnesota. That's not a rumor. It's part of a sweep that brought in the FBI, ICE, DEA, ATF, and state troopers across the Twin Cities metro. This video reconstructs how a single mass shooting got treated like an organized crime case. Bribes, structured cash deposits under $10,000, ledgers, and a command chain prosecutor say reached into the mayor's orbit. The real hook is how investigators connected street violence to political protection. Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. So here's the problem investigators ran into right away. If this was just a neighborhood shooting, why did the scene look like a timed job with a start point, a finish point, and a clean exit plan? At 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, the first burst hit the block, and the first 911 call came in seconds later. The caller didn't have time to sort out details. They just got the warning out. Shots fired, multiple shots. People are down. Oh my God, they're still shooting. Then more calls stacked up behind it, one after another, as neighbors realized this wasn't a couple of shots and then silence. It kept going fast and loud, and it moved. Police arrived within about 3 minutes and stepped into what they later treated like a battlefield report. Shell casings covered the pavement. Investigators counted evidence, pointing to more than 200 rounds fired. That alone makes detectives pause because most arguments don't produce that kind of volume, and most shooters don't bring enough ammo to keep going unless they expected to use it. Add in the fact that the casings reflected multiple weapons, and now you're looking at coordination. Not one person losing control. Then there's the spread. The dead and wounded weren't in one tight cluster. The carnage ran across 2 city blocks. That matters because it suggests movement and purpose. Either the shooters advanced or people tried to run and got cut down where they fell. And the whole thing ended almost as quickly as it started, roughly 90 seconds. Long enough to do damage, short enough to avoid getting pinned down. Witness accounts in the early case notes focused on the same outline. 6 masked shooters, 2 vehicles, in and out. Masks aren't about bravery. Masks are about buying time. When everyone you just terrorized can't give a face, you don't need luck. You need a plan that works for the first hour, before cameras get pulled, and before detectives start mapping who was where. The street itself told more of the story. 4 vehicles sat abandoned, left in the road like somebody dumped them mid-thought. Doors were open, windows were shattered. That can happen in the chaos, sure, but it also fits a dirty getaway move. Bring cars you can ditch, create confusion, force police to treat the whole area like a moving scene. And when you add casing patterns and close-range hits, the questions sharpen. Close-range gunshot wounds don't usually come from random spray. They suggest the shooters got close enough to pick targets, even if the rest of the rounds tore into anyone unlucky enough to be nearby. The victims' ages range from 19 to 43. Several people took multiple hits, and at least 8 victims were bystanders, people with no known tie to the trafficking network investigators believed was at the center of it. That's where the community's fear turned into shutdown. People stayed inside. They stopped talking. Families grieved in private, and witnesses weighed every word because the message of the attack was simple. Nobody on that block was untouchable. For detectives, week 1 was a mess. Too many shell casings to sort quickly. Too many weapons to match. Too many possible shooters to narrow. Too many escape paths off 2 blocks. They didn't have one clean suspect list because the crime scene didn't behave like a single few that got out of hand. It behaved like a team that arrived with roles. That's the split you hear in early theory talk. Street beef or coordinated hit. Investigators look for tells. Do they show up masked? Do they keep their time on target short? Do they swap vehicles? Do they shoot with control, aiming close, or do they just dump rounds? Do phones light up right before and right after? And the reason they vanished is that those boxes got checked. Masks, a tight 90-second window, and a vehicle strategy that pushed identification back by hours, maybe days. After that, the case stopped being only about the triggers. It turned into a hunt for whoever made that kind of access possible in the first place. That's where one word started popping up in tips, interviews, and quiet side conversations. the mayor. And once that word lands on a federal desk, the whole case stops looking like a single night of violence and starts looking like a long-running setup. Why would a local elected official matter to a shooting scene? Because if someone in power can smooth things over, then the shooters didn't just escape the block. They escaped the system that usually catches people after a massacre. Federal investigators say this didn't begin after the bodies hit the ground. Operation City Shield started about 14 months earlier out of the FBI's Minneapolis field office, after an informant from within the Somali community alleged that Mayor Hassan Ibrahim took bribes from a drug trafficking organization in exchange for political protection. That kind of allegation is catnip for federal agents because it suggests leverage, gatekeeping, and a promise of safety for people who shouldn't have any. If the tip is real, it means arrests get delayed, traffic stops get softened, and the right people hear about search warrants before they happen. Then the money trail kept agents from walking away. Investigators alleged more than $340,000 in unexplained cash deposits landed in bank accounts belonging to the mayor's wife and adult children over a 3-year period. The amounts mattered as much as the total. Deposits kept showing up just under $10,000, which investigators described as structuring, a way to avoid automatic federal reporting that kicks in at $10,000 or more. When you see repeated deposits hugging that line, it reads less like coincidence and more like someone who knows the rules well enough to bend them. This is where prosecutors start talking racketeering, and they don't do it because it sounds tough. Under RICO logic, they don't need to prove one dramatic order, one perfect recording, one moment where everyone confesses. They build a chain and try to show it's a pattern. Bribery on one end, money laundering in the middle, drug trafficking as the engine, and violence as enforcement. Even cleanup becomes part of the story, because an enterprise isn't only about making money, it's about keeping money safe, keeping workers in line, and keeping outsiders confused. That's also why intermediaries matter so much. Prosecutors identified Abdi Isef, a 38-year-old logistics coordinator, as a key connector who allegedly took direct orders from Mayor Ibrahim. People like that sit in the middle of the web. They can talk to street crews without looking like a street crew. They can move messages, money, and resources without having their name on a ballot. And when investigators can pin actions to an intermediary, it helps them argue the whole operation had management. The timestamp that prosecutors leaned on is a 4-minute phone call at 9:34 p.m. on the night of the shooting between Isef and the mayor. They described it as happening a little over 2 hours before gunfire erupted. It doesn't prove motive by itself, but it becomes a map pin. It gives agents a fixed point to compare against movements, other calls, and decisions made that night. If you're building a case about authorization, you don't get many cleaner anchors than that. They also pointed to a business motive, not a personal one. A power struggle between two rival Somali criminal organizations, the Dar Network and the Barawi clan, fighting over counterfeit prescription pills. These pills were designed to look like Xanax, Percocet, and Adderall, and investigators said they often contained fentanyl. The distribution routes stretched across Minnesota, Wisconsin, and the Dakotas. In that context, eliminating a rival isn't framed as revenge, it's framed as market control. 6 months after the shooting, City Shield went loud. On a cold February morning, agents hit 23 locations across the Twin Cities metro area with FBI, ICE, DEA, ATF, and state troopers moving at the same time. They arrested the mayor, the 6 alleged shooters, Isef and others tied to the 2 groups, leading to 23 indictments. Hitting wide like that isn't theater. It's how you stop warning calls, burner phone destruction, and evidence dumps. And that's why the mayor escalated everything. It turned a street case into a public corruption and racketeering case, where the protection is treated as part of the crime itself. But even after the raids, not everyone acted like this was clean and unified. Minnesota's Bureau of Criminal Apprehension later said the FBI refused to share evidence tied to other incidents, calling it concerning and unprecedented. And that kind of friction doesn't stay contained for long. The ending prosecutors wanted wasn't a mystery shooter in the dark. They went after a machine, and the fact Mayor Hassan Ibrahim accepted a plea deal says they believe the machine was real. He agreed to plead guilty to reduced charges, fully cooperate, and take a 35-year sentence, instead of risking life without parole. The talks reportedly took 3 weeks. But there's a bigger problem sitting behind all of this. If state investigators say federal partners withheld evidence in other Minnesota shootings, how do you trust the process when bodies pile up? So tell me, what's the bigger threat here? Crews, protection, or silence? Subscribe.